My name is Jenny and I just turned 30 years old. Growing up in an upper-middle-class Boston family, I always felt like an extra in the movie of my own life. Every year my birthday was somehow too expensive to celebrate properly, while my sister Sophia enjoyed extravagant parties with live bands and professional photographers. Years of quiet resentment built inside me, like pressure in a sealed container. This year, I decided to take matters into my own hands. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, stick around. And if you are watching from somewhere beautiful right now, drop your location in the comments and hit that subscribe button. I have got a story that might make you book your next flight. I grew up in a comfortable suburb just outside Boston in a 4-bedroom colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. My father worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown, while my mother ran a successful interior design business. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family with 2 daughters, family vacations to Cape Cod every summer, and matching outfits in our Christmas cards. But inside our home the dynamics were anything but equal. My sister Sophia, 3 years older than me, was the undisputed star of our family show. With her natural charisma, striking looks and outgoing personality, she commanded attention whenever she entered a room. My parents beamed with pride at everything she did, from her finger paintings in kindergarten to her lead roles in high school plays. I was always standing in the wings watching the spotlight follow her. The pattern with our birthdays started when I was around 7 years old. That year, all I wanted was a small pool party with 5 of my friends from school. Nothing fancy, just some swimming cake and maybe a few water balloons. I remembered carefully writing out my modest request on a piece of construction paper decorated with crayon drawings. "That sounds expensive, honey," my mother said, hardly looking up from her design magazine. "The pool club charges extra for parties, and then there is food, drinks, invitations. We will do something small at home instead." I tried not to show my disappointment as I nodded and walked away. 2 weeks later, we celebrated my birthday with a homemade cake and my one close friend, Tara, who lived next door. My parents gave me a set of colored pencils and a sketchbook. 3 weeks after that, Sophia turned 10. Our house transformed into an underwater fantasy land complete with professional decorations my mother had ordered. 20 of my sister's friends arrived wearing mermaid and pirate costumes that my parents had specified on the custom invitations. A woman dressed as a real mermaid sat by our backyard pond telling stories while a professional face painter created elaborate designs on giggling children's faces. "How come Sophia gets a big party?" I asked my father as I watched him setting up the snow cone machine. "Your sister has so many friends, Jenny," he replied, ruffling my hair without really looking at me. "It would be rude not to include everyone. Plus, double digits is a big deal." I nodded as if that made perfect sense. I was young, but even then something felt off about his explanation. Still, I wanted to be the good daughter who never complained, the one who understood. This pattern continued throughout elementary school. When I turned 8, I asked for a sleepover party with pizza and movies. My mother explained that ordering pizza for friends would be too costly. For my 9th birthday, I requested a trip to the local science museum with 2 friends. My father said admission prices had gotten too expensive lately. Meanwhile, Sophia's 11th birthday featured a professional photographer documenting her and 15 friends on a harbor cruise. For her 12th, my parents rented out a small petting zoo that took over our entire backyard. I learned to scale back my expectations. With Tara's help, I would make homemade decorations for my small celebrations. We would create paper chains to hang in my bedroom and design our own party hats from construction paper. Tara never questioned why my sister got big parties, while I did not. She simply showed up with thoughtful, handmade gifts and made me feel special for a few hours. As the years passed, I developed into a quiet, observant child. I became self-sufficient out of necessity, learning to find joy in small things in my own company. While Sophia demanded constant attention and validation, I retreated into books and my imagination. My parents seemed relieved by my low-maintenance personality, which only reinforced the dynamic. Everything changed the summer. I turned 12. Home alone one afternoon, while my parents were at one of Sophia's dance recitals, I was searching through the office for some tape to fix a torn book page. In the back of my father's filing cabinet, I found financial statements showing substantial investments, a healthy savings account, and even a vacation property in Vermont I had never heard mentioned. The numbers on those pages told a story very different from the one I had been living. We were not just comfortable, we were quite well off. The too expensive excuse suddenly rang hollow and something shifted inside me. It was not about the money. It never had been. I carefully returned the documents exactly as I had found them and never mentioned my discovery. But from that day forward, I started paying closer attention to the family dynamics around me with new, more skeptical eyes. I began to understand that my place in the family was not going to change unless I changed it myself, but I was still just a child dependent on my parents for everything. All I could do was watch, wait, and build my inner resources for the day when I would finally have some control over my own life. By the time I entered high school, I had developed a passion for photography. Something about capturing moments that others might miss spoke to my observant nature. I also fell in love with French culture after taking French language classes. The Romantic language, the art, the history, the food, all of it fascinated me and offered an escape from my increasingly uncomfortable family life. For my 16th birthday, I gathered my courage to ask for something I truly wanted, a basic digital camera. Nothing fancy or professional, just an entry-level model that would allow me to explore my interest in photography. That seems rather frivolous, Jenny, my father said at dinner 2 weeks before my birthday. Cameras are expensive and you would probably lose interest after a month. I have been reading about photography for over a year now. I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. I have been borrowing the school's camera for projects. My art teacher says I have a good eye. Maybe for Christmas, my mother suggested vaguely, effectively, closing the discussion. My 16th birthday came and went with a card containing $30 and a family dinner where the conversation centered around Sophia's college applications. I used the money to buy a photography book instead. 2 months later, Sophia turned 19 and my parents transformed our backyard into a concert venue. They hired a local band that was gaining popularity to perform live. The party cost thousands, judging by what I overheard my mother telling her friends. Fairy lights were strung across the entire yard. A temporary wooden dance floor was installed and catering tables groaned under the weight of gourmet food. As I watched Sophia dancing with her friends under the twinkling lights, the reality of my situation crystallized with painful clarity. It was not about money. It was not about practicality. It was simply that Sophia mattered more. I tried different strategies to gain my parents' attention and approval during those teenage years. First, I threw myself into academics, reasoning that good grades were something they would have to acknowledge. I made the honor roll consistently, but my achievements were met with basic acknowledgement rather than celebration. That is what we expect from you, Jenny. You have always been the sensible one, my mother would say, as if my success was merely a personality trait rather than hard work. When I briefly took up piano after learning that my mother had once dreamed of being a pianist, she seemed momentarily interested in my progress. But when Sophia suddenly declared an interest in music a few weeks later, my mother immediately arranged for professional lessons for her. My own musical education was forgotten in the excitement over Sophia's newly discovered talent. It was in debate team that I finally found my niche. I discovered I had a gift for logical arguments and public speaking that surprised everyone, including myself. The quiet, overlooked daughter turned out to have a powerful voice when given the right platform. I won several regional competitions, and for the first time I felt genuinely good at something that was all mine. Through these years, my friendship with Tara remained my emotional anchor. Unlike the conditional approval I sought at home, Tara's support was constant and genuine. We would spend hours in her bedroom or mine talking about everything from school drama to our dreams for the future. She was the first person I told about my secret desire to someday live in Paris, speaking fluent French and taking photographs of the city's hidden corners. When my 18th birthday approached, I made one last attempt at seeking family connection. I asked for a small dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant with just the 4 of us. Nothing extravagant, just a chance to feel special for one evening. "Oh, honey, that weekend is not going to work for us," my mother informed me 2 weeks before the date. "Your father and I have an important business trip to Chicago." We cannot reschedule it at this point. I nodded and said I understood. 3 days after my quiet birthday celebration with just Tara at a local pizza place, my parents returned with souvenirs from Chicago and stories of their successful meetings. A month later they presented Sophia with a car for her 21st birthday, a silver Audi Tate with a giant red bow sitting in our driveway. That fall I left for Northwestern University with a mixture of sadness and overwhelming relief. I had earned a partial academic scholarship and I had chosen a school far from Boston deliberately. The distance felt necessary for my survival. The day my parents dropped me off at my dormitory, I watched them drive away with the strangest feeling of liberation mixed with a deep unacknowledged grief for the family connection I had never truly had. It was at Northwestern that I discovered my true calling: international business combined with my love for French studies. As I immersed myself in classes and a new social environment, I began to understand that the world was much bigger than the narrow confines of my family dynamic. I could build a life where I was valued, where my presence mattered, where I could determine my own worth instead of having it assigned to me by others. Northwestern University became the fresh start I desperately needed. The campus energy, intellectual stimulation, and freedom to reinvent myself were intoxicating. I threw myself into my double major in business and French, quickly establishing myself as a dedicated student who professors remembered. For the first time, my insights were valued, my questions encouraged, and my ambitions taken seriously. During orientation week, I met Ashley, an art history major from California, with an infectious laugh, and Marcus, a pre-law student from Chicago with kind eyes and an encyclopedic knowledge of obscure films. Unlike the conditional relationships I had grown accustomed to, these friendships developed naturally based on genuine connection rather than convenience or obligation. "We are doing something for your birthday next month," Ashley announced one October afternoon as we studied in the library. No arguments. Marcus and I already started planning. "You do not have to," I protested, weakly surprised by their enthusiasm for a day that had always been treated as an afterthought. "That is what friends do," Marcus said simply. When my 19th birthday arrived, they blindfolded me and led me to the small lake on campus where they had set up a sunset picnic with my favorite foods, complete with battery-powered twinkle lights and a homemade cake. The three of us stayed there, talking until well past midnight, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. The entire celebration probably cost less than $50, but it was the most special birthday I had ever experienced. That pattern continued throughout college. My birthdays became days of genuine celebration with friends who valued me not for what I could do for them or how I made them look, but simply for being Jenny. The contrast with my family dynamics could not have been starker. Back home, the established patterns continued unaltered. During sophomore year, I made the dean's list both semesters, but my achievement was barely acknowledged during our summer family dinner conversations, which revolved around Sophia's new job at a prestigious gallery. The summer after junior year, I secured an internship at a global consulting firm in Chicago, staying in the city rather than returning to Boston. I used the opportunity to build my resume and, importantly, to start saving money. I had decided that financial independence would be my path to emotional freedom. When senior year came, my parents missed my graduation ceremony. Sophia had her first photography exhibit opening that same weekend in New York, and there was simply no way they could miss such an important event in her career. I told them I understood, completely hiding the hurt beneath a practiced smile during our video call. I watched other families gathering after the ceremony, parents beaming with pride and taking countless photos. Ashley's parents insisted on including me in their family photos, and Marcus's mom hugged me for so long, I almost broke down in tears. 2 months later, I attended Sophia's wedding, a lavish affair at a historic Boston hotel that must have cost our parents a small fortune. I smiled for photos, gave a polite toast as the sister of the bride, and quietly observed the familiar family dynamics playing out on a grander stage. At the reception, I overheard my mother telling her friends how they had spared no expense for Sophia's special day because you only get married once. After graduation, I accepted a position at the consulting firm where I had interned, moving into a tiny studio apartment in Chicago. The job was demanding with long hours and high expectations, but I thrived under the pressure. My analytical skills, attention to detail, and now fluent French made me valuable to the company, particularly for their international clients. Over the next 7 years, I worked my way steadily upward through the company. Every promotion came with more responsibility, more travel opportunities, and more financial security. I moved to New York when the firm offered me a position in their expanding East Coast office, allowing me to specialize in international business strategy. Each year, I allocated a portion of my growing salary to investments and savings guided by the financial knowledge I had gained, both through my business education and through watching my father manage our family's wealth. From a distance, I lived comfortably but modestly, finding more satisfaction in my growing financial security than in flashy displays of success. My annual birthday calls with my parents became increasingly perfunctory. They would call usually a day late with vague well wishes and quick updates about Sophia's latest accomplishments. I would thank them politely and tell them briefly about my work, carefully editing out any real details about my life or success. Last year, on my 29th birthday, they forgot to call altogether. 3 days later, my mother left a voicemail, "Jenny dear, so sorry, we missed your birthday. We have been absolutely swamped planning Sophia's baby shower. First grandchild, you know. So much to organize. We will make it up to you next year, promise. Love you." I listened to the message twice before deleting it, a strange calm settling over me. Something had finally broken loose inside me, some last thread of hope that things might change. In its place came an unexpected sense of freedom. If I truly did not matter to them, then I was under no obligation to maintain the pretense that they mattered to me. As I approached my 30th birthday, I made a decision. This year would be different. This year I would celebrate myself in a way that honored the woman I had become, not the overlooked daughter I had been. 3 months before my 30th birthday, I sat in my supervisor's office for my annual review. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan skyscraper, illuminating the city spread out below us. "Jenny, your performance this past year has been exceptional," Richard said, sliding a folder across his desk. "The European accounts have shown 20% growth under your management and client satisfaction scores are at an all-time high." I accepted the folder with a smile, already knowing it contained details of my promotion to senior consultant. I had worked incredibly hard for this advancement. "We have a new opportunity one would like you to consider," Richard continued. Loeffler Industries in Paris is looking for a strategic partner to help them expand into American markets. They specifically requested you after your presentation at the international conference last fall. My heart skipped a beat. Paris. Yes, initially for 2 weeks to establish the relationship and develop preliminary strategies. You would be our point person for the account moving forward. I opened my calendar app on my phone, my mind racing with possibilities. When would this trip be scheduled? They would like you there the last week of October, potentially extending into early November if needed. I stared at the dates on my screen. The last week of October included my birthday, October 28th. "Is that timeline going to work for you, Richard?" asked when I remained silent. In that moment, something crystallized within me. For years, my birthdays had been afterthoughts, obligations, others fulfilled minimally if at all. What if instead my 30th birthday became a beginning rather than an ending? What if I gave myself the celebration I had always been denied? "The timing is perfect," I said with newfound confidence. I would be happy to take on Loeffler Industries. That evening, I sat in my apartment with my laptop open, heart pounding as I browsed luxury accommodations in Paris. After an hour of research, I booked a first-class ticket on Air France and reserved a penthouse apartment with a private terrace overlooking the Eiffel Tower. The combined cost was equivalent to 3 months of rent, but my savings were substantial and something inside me had shifted. For once, I was going to prioritize myself unapologetically. I told no one in my family about my plans. Not my parents, not Sophia. The secrecy felt both thrilling and necessary, like I was finally writing my own story after years of being a secondary character in someone else's narrative. 2 weeks before my birthday, my mother called for our monthly check-in. "Jenny, honey, how are you?" "Things have been absolute madness here," she began, without waiting for my response. "We are planning the most wonderful celebration for Sophia. Can you believe she is 6 months along already? We have rented the yacht club for the baby shower, and the theme is nautical new arrival. The custom decorations alone are costing a small fortune, but nothing is too good for our first grandchild. I made appropriate noises of interest as she detailed the elaborate plans, the designer cake, the string quartet that would provide background music. Oh, and your birthday is coming up too, is not it? She added as an obvious afterthought. Your father and I were thinking maybe we could grab lunch next month sometime when things settle down a bit. Nothing fancy, just a quick catch-up. That sounds nice, I replied, my voice giving away nothing, as I simultaneously confirmed my car service reservation from Charles de Gaulle Airport to my Paris apartment. Perfect, I will check our calendar and get back to you. Now let me tell you about the personalized sailor outfits we ordered for the shower games. As my trip approached, I prepared meticulously. I shopped for a new wardrobe that reflected the confident, successful woman I had become, rather than the invisible daughter I had been. I consulted with Ashley, now a curator at a Chicago art museum, about must-see exhibitions and hidden gems in Paris. I planned a personal photography expedition around the city. A tribute to the passion I had maintained, despite my parents' dismissal of E.T. The day before my departure, my colleagues surprised me with a small pre-birthday celebration complete with my favorite chocolate cake and a card signed by everyone on my team. Richard pulled me aside afterward. Enjoy Paris, Jenny. You have earned this opportunity, he said, handing me a small box containing a Mont Blanc pen engraved with my initials. The team values you tremendously. I hope you know that. I felt a lump in my throat as I thanked him. Validation and recognition still felt foreign, even after all these years of professional success. That evening, as I packed my final items, my phone rang with Sophia's name on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. Jenny, thank God you picked up. I have been going crazy with all these baby shower preparations. Mom and Dad are driving me nuts with their suggestions. They have invited practically everyone they know. Sophia launched into a detailed complaint about the excessive attention, apparently oblivious to the irony. That sounds stressful, I offered neutrally, folding a cashmere sweater and placing it in my suitcase. Anyway, I just wanted to check if you are still coming. Mom mentioned your birthday is the same weekend, but I figured since we never really do much for it anyway, it would not be a conflict. I closed my eyes briefly, allowing myself to feel the familiar sting before letting it go. Actually, I will be out of town for work that weekend. A last-minute assignment. Oh, Sophia sounded genuinely disappointed, and I wondered if perhaps she had actually wanted me there. That is too bad. But I understand work comes first, right? Will you be anywhere interesting, at least? Just a client meeting, I said, vaguely zipping my suitcase closed with finality. Nothing special. After we hung up, I looked around my apartment, then at my packed luggage. Tomorrow, I would board a first-class flight to Paris. I would celebrate my 30th birthday in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, staying in a luxury apartment, answerable to no one but myself. For the first time in my life, I felt not just resignation about my birthday, but genuine excitement. The anticipation was almost overwhelming as I set my alarm and went to bed dreaming of Parisian streets and new beginnings. The first-class cabin on Air France was another world entirely. A flight attendant greeted me by name as I boarded, escorting me to a private pod with a seat that transformed into a fully flat bed. Before takeoff, she offered me champagne in a real glass flute along with a hot towel for my hands. Is this your first time in first class, mademoiselle? She asked, noticing my white eyes. Yes, I admitted. I usually fly economy. Then we will make sure it is memorable, she promised, with a warm smile. The experience was indeed unforgettable. Multi-course meal served on fine china, premium wines, luxurious bedding for sleeping and attentive service throughout the flight. For those 7 hours, I was treated as someone who mattered, whose comfort and happiness were priorities rather than afterthoughts. When we landed at Charles de Gaulle, I was among the first passengers to disembark. A driver in a crisp uniform waited for me at arrivals holding a sign with my name. He took my luggage and led me to a sleek black Mercedes. Welcome to Paris, Mademoiselle Jenkins. It is a beautiful day in the city, he said, as we pulled away from the airport. Is this your first visit? Yes, I replied, watching the French countryside gradually give way to the outskirts of Paris. I have dreamed about coming here since I was a teenager. Ah, then you must be excited. And what brings you to Paris, business or pleasure? I smiled, looking out at the city that was growing more distinct with each passing minute. Both. I am here for work but also to celebrate my 30th birthday. A significant birthday in a significant city, he nodded approvingly. You have chosen well. The apartment I had rented exceeded even the beautiful photos online. Located in the 7th arrondissement, the penthouse occupied the top floor of a classic Haussmann building. The rental agent who met me there showed me around with obvious pride. This is one of our most requested properties, she explained, leading me through rooms filled with a perfect blend of classic French architecture and modern luxury. And here is the feature most guests find most special. She opened a set of French doors to reveal a private terrace with an unobstructed view of the Eiffel Tower. Comfortable outdoor furniture, potted lemon trees and twinkling string lights created a magical setting. The tower lights up with a sparkling light show every hour after dark, she added. Most guests say it is like having a private show just for them. After she left, I stood on the terrace alone, breathing in the Paris air. The city sprawled before me, beautiful and indifferent to my presence. There was something liberating about being in a place where no one knew me, where no one had preconceived notions about my worth or place in the world. I woke on my birthday to sunlight streaming through the terrace doors I had left partially open. For a moment I lay still, listening to the sounds of Paris beginning its day below, church bells ringing in the distance. 30 years old, I thought. A new decade. A new beginning. I spent the morning wandering through my neighborhood, stopping at a local pâtisserie for a perfect pain au chocolate and café cream. The elderly proprietor wished me bonjour as I left, his smile genuine, though we shared no language beyond a few French pleasantries. Throughout the day I explored the city, deliberately avoiding the most touristy areas. I wandered through narrow streets in Le Marais, photographed beautiful doors and hidden courtyards, sat in parks watching Parisians go about their daily lives. At the Shakespeare and Company bookstore I purchased a collection of French poetry, and the cashier struck up a conversation when she noticed my camera. You have a photographer's eye, she commented in accented English after I showed her some of my images. You see details others miss. Thank you, I replied oddly, touched by this observation from a stranger. For my birthday dinner I had made a reservation at a small but acclaimed restaurant tucked away on a quiet street. The maitre d' seated me at a perfect table with a view of both the intimate dining room and the open kitchen where chefs worked with focused precision. You are dining alone this evening, he asked as he presented the menu. Yes, I am celebrating my birthday, I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. His eyebrows raised slightly. Then we must make it special. Please allow our chef to prepare a tasting menu for you. With your permission. I nodded, and what followed was a 3-hour culinary journey through courses of exquisite French cuisine, each plate a work of art, each bite a new experience. The chef himself, a middle-aged man with kind ice and flower on his sleeve, came to my table between courses. A birthday should be celebrated properly, he said, refilling my wine glass personally, especially in Paris. By the time I returned to my apartment I felt a kind of contentment I had rarely experienced. I stepped out onto the terrace just as the Eiffel Tower began its hourly light show, thousands of bulbs twinkling like stars against the night sky. On impulse I took out my phone and captured the perfect image, the sparkling tower framed by the terrace railing, the lights of Paris spread out below. Without overthinking it I posted the photo to my Instagram account with a simple caption, treating myself to the birthday I deserve. Paris, you are everything I imagined. Within minutes notifications began flooding my phone. Friends from college and work commenting with amazement and congratulations. Then text messages started arriving from family. First my mother, Jenny, are you in Paris? Why did not you tell us? We have been trying to reach you all day for a quick birthday call. Then my father, your mother is very concerned, please call immediately, is this work related, seems excessive. And finally, Sophia, oh my god, are you seriously in Paris right now? While I am stuck here 6 months pregnant, mom and dad are freaking out, call them. I silenced my phone and placed it face down on the nightstand. For years I had been available whenever they deigned to remember my existence. For once they could wait for me. The following week unfolded like a dream. My meetings with Le Fleur Industries went exceptionally well. My fluent French and deep understanding of both markets impressed the executives, and we quickly established a productive working relationship. The initial 2-week assignment showed such promise that they requested extended consultation. In my free time I continued exploring Paris with growing confidence. I took a day trip to Giverny to see Monet's Garden, spent an afternoon at the Rodin Museum, and discovered small neighborhood bistros where owners began to recognize me and greet me warmly. I made friends with an American expatriate painter at a café near my apartment, and she invited me to a small gallery opening where I met interesting people from around the world. One evening, while enjoying a glass of wine at a jazz club in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, a French businessman named Antoine struck up a conversation that lasted until closing time. He was intelligent, witty, and genuinely interested in my thoughts about everything from American politics to French cinema. We exchanged numbers at the end of the night, and he took me to dinner twice before I left Paris. Each day I posted one carefully selected photo to social media: morning coffee at a sidewalk café, the view from Sacré-Cœur, architectural details from Notre Dame, an artistic shot of the Seine at sunset. I never responded to the increasingly frantic messages from my family, though I did send a brief email to my mother confirming I was fine and would be in touch when I returned. As my scheduled departure approached, I made a spontaneous decision to extend my stay by another week. I had accumulated vacation time I had never used, and Richard was supportive when I called to request the additional days. "The Le Fleur team speaks highly of you," he said. "Take the time you need. The office is running smoothly here." That extra week became the most liberating of all. With business obligations fulfilled, I was free to experience Paris purely for pleasure. I visited small museums off the tourist track, took a cooking class from a renowned pastry chef, and spent one perfect day simply sitting in the Luxembourg Gardens, reading my book and watching children sail toy boats on the pond. For the first time in my life, I felt truly present, neither dwelling on past hurts nor anxiously planning for future approval. In a city where I was just another anonymous visitor, I paradoxically felt more seen and more real than I ever had in the family that had rendered me invisible. By the time I boarded my flight back to New York, my phone contained dozens of missed calls, voicemails, and text messages from my family. I had responded only with brief assurances that I was fine, deliberately withholding details about my extended stay or my experiences. The messages had evolved from confusion to concern to indignation to outright anger. My mother's latest voicemail was particularly telling. "Jennifer Marie Jenkins, this behavior is completely unacceptable. Your father and I are deeply disappointed by your selfishness. To abandon your family responsibilities for some extravagant vacation without even the courtesy of proper notification is not how we raised you. We expect a full explanation upon your return." Family responsibilities. The phrase echoed in my mind as the plane crossed the Atlantic. What family responsibilities had ever been extended to me beyond being a convenient afterthought when it suited them? What family consideration had ever been shown for my birthdays, my achievements, my existence? When I unlocked the door to my New York apartment, I felt like a different person returning to a previous life. The space looked exactly as I had left it, yet somehow smaller, less significant. I unpacked, methodically placing my Paris souvenirs carefully around the apartment: a small Eiffel Tower sculpture on my bookshelf, a vintage French movie poster I had found at a market to hang on the wall, the poetry book on my nightstand. I had barely finished unpacking when my phone rang with my father's number. "We need to have a family meeting," he said without preamble when I answered. "Your mother and I are coming to New York tomorrow. We will meet you for dinner at 7 at Le Bernardin. Sophia will join us." "Hello to you too, Dad," I replied calmly. "Yes, I had a lovely trip, thank you for asking. Le Bernardin works for me. See you tomorrow." I hung up before he could respond, a small act of defiance that sent a thrill through me. The Jenny who had returned from Paris was not the same one who had left New York 3 weeks earlier. Le Bernardin was one of the finest restaurants in the city, a place where my father could simultaneously display his wealth and ensure we would all maintain proper decorum in such an elegant setting. I arrived exactly on time, dressed in a chic black dress I had purchased in Paris, my hair and makeup impeccable. The maitre d' led me to a corner table where my parents and Sophia were already seated, their faces, a unified mask of disapproval. "There she is, our world traveler," my father said, as I sat down, his tone making the words sound like an accusation rather than a greeting. "Hello, everyone," I replied pleasantly, placing my napkin in my lap. "How are you all doing?" "How are we doing?" my mother repeated incredulously. "We have been worried sick, completely in the dark, while you gallivanted around Paris on some sort of self-indulgent spree." "I sent emails confirming I was fine," I pointed out. "And I am an adult with my own life and career. I do not need permission for my travels." "This is not about permission," my father interjected, "this is about responsibility and consideration. To just disappear without proper notification, to spend what must have been an exorbitant amount on such a frivolous trip to miss important family events." "What family events did I miss?" I asked quietly. "Sophia's doctor appointment," my mother replied immediately. "We were all supposed to be there to see the ultrasound together. We had planned it for weeks." I turned to Sophia, who sat uncomfortably beside our mother, her baby bump visible beneath her flowing top. "I apologize if I missed something you wanted me to attend, Sophia, that was not my intention." Before Sophia could respond, my mother continued. "And then to post those photos flaunting your extravagance while your sister is stuck at home unable to travel in her condition. It was incredibly insensitive, Jenny. We raised you better than that." "Did you?" I asked, maintaining my calm as our waiter approached with menus. After ordering, I took a sip of water and addressed them all directly. "I went to Paris for work initially. A major potential client requested me specifically. While there, I decided to extend my stay to celebrate my 30th birthday in a meaningful way." "With whose money?" my father demanded. "That penthouse must have cost a fortune. First-class flights, designer shopping. Where did all this come from suddenly?" "My money," I replied simply. "I have been working at the same firm for 8 years now. I am a senior consultant managing international accounts. I have savings and investments. I can afford my lifestyle." My mother blinked in surprise. "But those accommodations looked incredibly expensive in your photos." "They were," I acknowledged. "I chose to spend my money on something important to me." "We always thought you did not care about celebrations," my mother said defensively. "You never complained about your small birthdays. You seemed content with simple things." I placed my fork down carefully beside my plate. I stopped asking because it hurt too much to be told no every time. I learned very young that my desires were not priorities in our family. "That is ridiculous," my father scoffed. "We gave you everything you needed." "Did you?" I asked, and then for the first time in my life I laid out the truth plainly. "When I was 7 you told me a pool party was too expensive, then threw Sophia an elaborate mermaid party 3 weeks later. When I was 16 a basic digital camera was deemed frivolous, but Sophia got a live band for her 19th birthday. For my 18th birthday you scheduled a business trip the same weekend, then bought Sophia a car for her 21st. You missed my college graduation for Sophia's gallery opening." The table fell silent as my words hung in the air between us. "We gave you what we thought you wanted," my father finally said, his voice less certain. "You never seemed to care about big celebrations." "I cared," I said quietly. "I just learned not to show it because the disappointment was too painful. I became what you wanted me to be, the low-maintenance daughter who never caused trouble while you poured all your attention and resources into Sophia." My mother's face had grown pale. "That is not fair, Jenny. We love you both equally." "Equal love does not mean identical treatment," I acknowledged, "but the disparity between us was never about practicality or different personalities. It was favoritism, plain and simple." "How dare you," my father began, but to everyone's surprise Sophia interrupted him. "She is right," she said quietly, tears forming in her eyes. "I always knew it and I never said anything. I took advantage of it." My parents turned to her in shock. "Sophia, that is not true," my mother protested weakly. "It is," Sophia insisted, her voice breaking. "When we were kids I used to brag to Jenny about everything I got that she did not. I knew it was unfair, but I liked being the special one. Even now, with this baby, I have been milking the attention for all it is worth without once considering how it must feel for Jenny to be sidelined again. My father looked between us, genuine confusion on his face. We never meant to make you feel less important, Jenny. Intentions and impact are different things, I replied. I built a successful life and career with minimal support or recognition from my family. I am not angry anymore, but I am done pretending. I went to Paris because I wanted to, because I had earned it, and because for once in my life I wanted to celebrate myself properly instead of waiting for acknowledgement that never comes. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table, broken only when our waiter returned with our entrees. The timing was almost comical in its awkwardness. I think I need some air, I said, placing my napkin on the table and standing. Please enjoy your meals. I will cover my portion of the check on my way out. Jenny, wait, my mother called, but I was already walking away, my head high as I navigated between the elegant tables toward the exit. Outside, the New York night enveloped me in noise and energy. I began walking with no particular destination in mind, just allowing myself to process the confrontation that had been 30 years in the making. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my purse, but I ignored it, focusing instead on the sensation of finally having spoken my truth after decades of silent acceptance. As I reached Washington Square Park, I found a bench and sat down, watching late-night dog walkers and students hurrying across the square. My phone buzzed again, and this time I checked it to find a message from Tara. Saw your Paris photos. So proud of you for finally doing something for yourself. Call me when you are ready to talk. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me despite the autumn chill. Some connections I realized had been genuine all along. 3 months after my return from Paris, I moved into a new apartment in Brooklyn with large windows and enough space for a proper home office. The first item I hung on the wall was a framed photograph I had taken of the Eiffel Tower at sunset from my penthouse terrace. Each time I looked at it, I was reminded not of the luxury of the accommodation but of the moment I had finally chosen myself. The aftermath of the confrontation dinner had been complicated and messy, as family reckonings often are. Initially, there had been anger and defensiveness from my parents, tearful phone calls from Sophia, and several weeks of uncomfortable distance. But slowly, tentatively, something new began to emerge from the rubble of our old dynamic. My parents started calling weekly, their conversations marked by an awkward but genuine attempt to engage with my actual life rather than treating me as an afterthought. My father asked about my work projects with real interest, while my mother inquired about my photography hobby, even suggesting I send her some of my favorite Paris images to print and frame. Your apartment looks lovely, Jenny, my mother commented during our most recent video call, her eyes taking in the visible portion of my living room. You have a good eye for design. Thank you, I replied, still getting used to receiving direct compliments from her. I have been enjoying making this space my own. Sophia and I had begun building a different kind of sibling relationship, one between adults rather than the hierarchy of our childhood. She had called me a week after the dinner, sobbing apologies for her role in the family dynamics. I never stood up for you, she had admitted. I saw how they treated you differently, and I just accepted the benefits without thinking about how it hurt you. We were children, I reminded her, the responsibility was not yours. But we are not children anymore, she had replied, and I want to do better. Since then, we had spoken regularly, having conversations that went deeper than the surface-level exchanges of our past. When her son was born in January, she called me from the hospital before calling our parents. Would you like to be his godmother? She asked tentatively. I would understand if you would rather not. The request had surprised me, touching something deep within my heart. I would be honored, I had replied, meaning et professionnellement, my career continued its upward trajectory. The Le Fleur account had been a massive success, leading to my appointment as head of international partnerships for the firm's East Coast division. I travel to Paris quarterly now, as well as to other European cities, building a reputation for cross-cultural business development. Your ability to bridge perspectives is exceptional. Richard had told me during my most recent performance review, clients trust you because you truly see them. Perhaps the most significant change, however, was in my personal life. I had begun dating Michael, a landscape architect I had met at a photography exhibit. Unlike previous relationships, where I had carefully managed expectations and kept parts of myself hidden with Michael, I found myself being unexpectedly open about my past and my feelings. My family and I are working on rebuilding our relationship. I told him one evening as we walked through Central Park. It is challenging sometimes, but worth the effort. Families are complicated, he had replied, taking my hand. The important thing is that you are prioritizing your own happiness now. My friendships had deepened as well. Tara visited from Boston regularly, and Ashley flew in from Chicago for a weekend every few months. Marcos, now a public defender in Philadelphia, joined us whenever he could. These were the people who had valued me long before I learned to value myself. As my next birthday approached, I received a surprising invitation from my parents for dinner at their home. When I arrived at the familiar Boston house, I found not just my parents and Sophia's family, but also Tara, who grinned at my shocked expression. We wanted to do something special for your 31st, my mother explained nervously as she led me to the dining room. Nothing extravagant, but meaningful. The table was set beautifully with candles and flowers. A modest stack of thoughtfully chosen gifts sat on a side table. My father poured champagne for everyone, then raised his glass. To Jenny, he said, his voice carrying an emotion I had rarely heard directed at me. Our daughter who has shown us through her grace and success what we failed to see for too many years. We are so proud of the woman you have become, largely without our help. We hope you will give us the chance to do better going forward. I blinked back unexpected tears, touched by the effort and sincerity behind his words. It was not a perfect resolution, nor a complete healing of 3 decades of emotional neglect. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement, a step towards something healthier. Later that evening, as we finished dessert, my mother reached across the table to take my hand. We have been talking your father and we wondered if you might like to join us for a family trip this summer. Sophia and the baby would come too, of course. We thought perhaps Paris. I smiled at the irony and the effort behind the suggestion. I think I would like that, I said. But I was actually planning a trip to Tokyo for my birthday this year, with Michael and some friends. Instead of the disappointment or dismissal I might once have expected, my mother nodded. That sounds wonderful. Perhaps you could show us your Paris another time. As I drove back to my hotel that night, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The hurt of 3 decades would not disappear overnight and our family would never be a perfect Hallmark card image. But there was movement, growth, a willingness to see each other more truly that had not existed before. The next morning, before catching my flight back to New York, I sent invitations to my parents and Sophia for a small gathering at my Brooklyn apartment the following month. Nothing elaborate, just dinner and conversation in the home I had created for myself. I realized that celebrating yourself does not require anyone else's permission. Sometimes the greatest gift is recognizing your own worth and letting others catch up to what you have known all along. The journey from invisibility to self-celebration had been long and often painful, but standing firmly in my own light now felt like the most natural thing in the world. What about you? Have you ever had to create your own celebration when others forgot your worth? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of finding your own path. Life is too short to wait for others to make you feel special. So go ahead, book that trip, buy those tickets, or simply give yourself the permission to prioritize your own joy. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember your worth is not determined by others' ability to see it.